My badge failed at 8:01. Not once. Twice. The scanner blinked red like it had been offended by me. The guard studied his shoes, and the receptionist stared at the floor as if it were revealing stock tips. Then my phone buzzed. Urgent performance review. 8:03 a.m. Conference room B? No greeting, no explanation, no signature, just an Outlook invitation wearing a funeral suit. When I entered the glass conference room, Grant Whitmore sat at the head, smiling like a man who had discovered leadership on a podcast. Beside him sat Paula Keene from HR. Hands on an envelope. Grant folded his fingers. Mira, Sterling Ridge is restructuring. Your role no longer fits our new direction. I looked at wall clock. 19 hours. That was how long remained before my $4 million performance bonus vested. So, I said, you're terminating me before my bonus clears. Grant gave a laugh. Unfortunate timing. Of course. In corporate America, theft sounds classier when it wears a blazer. He thought he had saved $4 million. Paula slid the envelope toward me and explained that I would receive 12 weeks of severance if I signed a confidentiality agreement. 12 weeks. For 7 years of building their revenue machine, protecting clients, and closing the Halden Group package worth $180 million. If you're wondering why I didn't panic, why Grant's little timing trick was about to backfire, then please like this video. Where are you listening from, and what's the temperature there? You know what? I was Chief Revenue Strategy Officer. Grant was the new CEO, a man with expensive suits, shiny teeth, and the emotional depth of a slogan. He hated that I read contracts. He hated more that I remembered them. I pushed the envelope back. You should reread my 2021 addendum. Grant smirked. I don't run this company by fine print. Clearly, I said. I stood, handed Paula my badge, and left without signing. 5 minutes later, they locked my account. That triggered clause 14B. I want to make one thing clear. This story is fictional, inspired by real workplace situations. Some elements were enhanced with AI to make the story more vivid, emotional, and meaningful, while highlighting the deeper lessons behind it. Now let me explain who I am. Before Grant discovered the thrilling art of firing people before breakfast, I had spent 7 years keeping Sterling Ridge from collapsing under its own arrogance. I was not just strategy, though that was the title they printed on my door when they wanted investors to feel safe. I rebuilt the revenue forecast after the 2020 liquidity scare. When 3 institutional clients were one nervous phone call away from leaving, I redesigned the client risk dashboard, trained the senior sales team, and personally kept 23 accounts from walking. Those accounts brought in between $5 and $40 million a year. Grant later called that basic retention cute. Grant arrived 16 months earlier with perfect teeth, a private equity vocabulary, and the confidence of a man who had never been asked a follow-up question. In his first leadership meeting, he called my projections too dense, then used the same numbers 2 weeks later in a board deck with his name on the cover. I watched him click through my work while saying, "Our new vision is finally taking shape." Our new vision. My spreadsheet. His haircut. The unfairness got sharper after Halden Group. I had spent 4 months negotiating that $180 million package, including penalty language if Sterling changed key leadership without notice. I warned Grant not to touch the account team. He laughed. Mira, you make every contract sound like a hostage situation. No, I said. I make every contract sound like something you should read. That was when he started excluding me. First from executive updates, then from board prep, finally from the Halden celebration dinner, where he toasted decisive leadership beside the client relationship I had built from scratch. 3 days before my termination, Paula accidentally forwarded me Grant's draft announcement. It called my firing a strategic transition following completed growth acceleration. Then I saw the line beneath it. Termination before bonus cycle reduces outstanding compensation exposure. I saved the email. And suddenly, Grant's smile made perfect sense to me now. I did not go home after conference room B. Home was for people who needed to process betrayal with tea and a blanket. I needed legal. So I took the elevator to the 34th floor and walked into Elena Marsh's office holding my contract. Elena was internal counsel, the one person at Sterling Ridge who still believed signatures meant something. She looked up from her monitor. "Mira, I heard you were terminated," I said, "without cause. 19 hours before my bonus vested." Her expression tightened. I placed the contract on her desk and tapped the tab I had marked. Grant just triggered Clause 14B. For half a second. Elena smiled, like she thought I was using legal sarcasm. Then she read the paragraph. Her smile died politely. Which is how lawyers scream. Clause 14. B was simple enough for anyone with humility to understand. If Sterling Ridge terminated me without documented cause within 30 days of any bonus, stock option, or performance payment, the company owed me the full $4 million bonus, plus twice that amount if the termination suggested avoidance. 18 months of base salary, attorney fees, and my right to refuse private mediation if they acted in bad faith. Elena read it again. "You knew they might do this," she asked. "I knew Grant would do something cheap." I said, "I just didn't know he'd do it before lunch." The beautiful part was that nothing had been hidden. I had sent Grant, Paula, and the CFO a plain English summary in 2021. Grant had replied, "Fine, approved. Don't slow this down. 5 words. Millions of dollars. Modern leadership." Elena opened the board minutes archive, then froze. "Mira, this wasn't just signed. The compensation committee approved it officially." "Good," I said. She began forwarding the packet upstairs. Grant pictured me crying in a parking garage. Instead, I slid one more file across Elena's desk. It was the 2021 recording. Grant's voice filled the room. "Just sign it. These protective clauses never happen." By 10:15, Grant had stopped looking smug. Elena's call had reached him faster than a bad earnings rumor. And Clause 14B sounded less charming when read aloud by counsel, from what Nathan later obtained. Grant dragged Paula into HR and demanded my performance file. Paula opened it. Then she opened it again. Because denial pairs beautifully with panic. There were no warnings, no complaints, no coaching notes, no missed targets. My reviews were stuffed with phrases like strategic asset, irreplaceable client anchor, and revenue pillar, corporate poetry. They had spent years calling me essential, then tried to fire me like a broken printer cartridge. Grant snapped, "Nobody's perfect. Find something." Paula suggested an internal memo saying I had been difficult to align with leadership priorities and resistant to innovation culture, in office English. That means I understood the business and refused to clap for nonsense. So they tried to create a record after terminating me. Brilliant. Like robbing a bank. Then emailing the teller for a receipt. The HR system time-stamped every edit. Worse. Grant used his own executive login to add a note at 10:42 a.m., 3 hours after I had been fired. He wrote that I had shown a pattern of obstruction. The only thing I had obstructed was his ability to be stupid without witnesses, Paula warned him. Grant. If legal sees the timestamp, he cut her off. Legal works for me. That sentence was wrong in so many ways, it needed its own compliance training. Meanwhile, I was at Nathan Greer's office, signing a preservation notice requiring Sterling Ridge to retain every email, Slack message, meeting note, access log, and HR entry tied to my termination. If they deleted or altered anything, it could become evidence tampering. Grant called me twice. I ignored both. Then he texted, "You're making this bigger than necessary." I forwarded it to Nathan. At 11:06, Elna found the edits. At 11:07, the board received an alert post-termination employee record modification detected. Grant thought the $4 million bonus was the problem. He was wrong. The real problem was Halden Group, the $180 million client package he had been bragging about to investors, lenders, and anyone trapped near an elevator. In that contract, Halden had a protection clause. If Sterling Ridge changed the strategic lead without 60 days' notice, Halden could pause implementation and withhold payments. Who wrote that clause? I did. Who failed to read it? Grant. A sad little tradition was forming. At 12:18, Halden learned I had been fired through an automated contact update. Nothing says premium client service like a robot announcing that the only person who understood your operating model had been removed before lunch. By 12:40, Halden demanded an emergency call. Grant joined with his polished CEO smile. "We're enhancing the client service structure," he said. There was a pause. Then Maribel Stone, Halden's chief operating officer, replied, "You fired the only person who understands our structure." Grant introduced my replacement, Landon Price, a young vice president whose greatest professional achievement was using the phrase scalable excellence without laughing. Landon had once asked me whether a basis point was a software tool. I wish I were joking. Halden was not comforted. Maribel asked him one question about the transition model. Landon blinked. Grant jumped in. "We have full continuity." "Then send us the documented transition notice," Maribel said. Silence. Beautiful, expensive silence. Within an hour, Halden activated its contractual pause and held back the first $22 million implementation payment. The CFO nearly swallowed his own tongue. A termination designed to save $4 million was now threatening $22 million in cash flow. A $180 million deal. And Sterling Ridge's credibility. Grant, naturally, blamed me. "She's sabotaging us from outside," Elena answered coldly. "No, she's just no longer inside to save you from contracts you didn't read." By late afternoon, Halden demanded proof that my replacement had followed the required transition process. Otherwise, they would terminate the entire agreement. Then my phone rang. Maribel's voice was calm. "Mira, are you bound by any non-compete?" I looked out the window and smiled once. I did not answer Halden with a yes. That would have been too easy. And easy is where sloppy people get sued. Grant would have loved to accuse me of stealing clients, poaching business, or whatever phrase insecure executives use when competence leaves the building. So, I did everything properly. Nathan reviewed my contract line by line. There was no enforceable non-compete, only a confidentiality clause. That meant I could not use Sterling Ridge's private data, client files, pricing models, or internal documents. Fine. I did not need any of that. I had something harder to delete: memory, judgment, and 7 years of earned trust. While Grant was apparently shouting through leadership meetings, I sent Sterling Ridge my formal demand package. Total amount $11.8 million. It included the $4 million bonus, the avoidance multiplier under Clause 14B, 18 months of base salary, bad faith termination damages, and estimated attorney fees, according to Nathan's source. Grant laughed when he saw it. "She thinks she's worth almost $12 million, the CFO answered. "No, the contract says she is." That line alone deserved a frame. I also sent the board a clean timeline: the 2021 addendum signing, my explanatory email, Grant's approval, the vesting date, my 803 termination, and his 1042 attempt to rewrite my HR file. Each timestamp landed like a nail. Not dramatic, not emotional, just final. Grant tried one more performance. His attorney threatened to sue me for interfering with client relationships. Nathan replied with one paragraph. "Please identify the specific conduct at issue. Otherwise, we will treat this correspondence as intimidation intended to avoid contractual payment obligations." Grant went quiet. By evening, the board began meeting without him. That was when I knew the room had changed. Powerful men are rarely excluded by accident. At 7:14, my phone buzzed. A board member I barely knew had sent a message. "Do you have proof Grant knew about your bonus date before termination?" I stared at the screen. Then opened my archive. Of course I did. Saved and time-stamped. I had proof. Not one little receipt. Either. I had the kind of proof that makes lawyers sit straighter and executives suddenly develop stomach problems. The key email came from Grant to Paula the afternoon before my termination. "Terminate before bonus hits." 5 words. Short, stupid, and expensive enough to belong in a museum exhibit called Historic Failures in Executive Judgment. Paula had forwarded it to HR with her own note, "Please keep this discreet." Unfortunately for Paula, discretion is not the same as competence. She had accidentally included me on the original chain, then recalled the message 30 seconds later, in a consumer inbox. Maybe that works. In a corporate system with retention logs, recall notices, and legal archives, it only creates another timestamp proving you knew the message was bad. I sent everything to Nathan. Within an hour, he added the email chain to my demand file and forwarded it to the board's counsel. I was not in the room when they opened it, but Elena later described the silence as uncomfortable, which, coming from a lawyer, basically means someone's career was bleeding on the carpet. Grant tried to explain. "I meant before the new budget cycle," Elena asked. "Then why did you write bonus no answer?" Paula, sensing the wolves had learned her address, said Grant had directed the entire termination. Grant immediately claimed Paula had misinterpreted a staffing strategy. Beautiful. Two executives in tailored clothing, clawing at each other over a decision they had both been arrogant enough to document. The board reviewed the timeline again, my vesting date, Grant's email, the 803 termination, the fake HR edits, and Clause 14B. This time, nobody called it unfortunate timing. They called it what it was, bad faith termination designed to avoid payment. That was the first moment Justice entered the room and pulled out a chair. Then the CFO spoke. "Pale and careful. If this becomes public litigation, we may trigger disclosure issues under our $250 million credit facility." And suddenly, my firing was no longer an HR problem. By the next morning, my termination had outgrown HR. It was no longer a personnel dispute. It was a financial crisis wearing a name badge. Sterling Ridge had a $250 million credit facility, and if the bank decided Grant's little bonus avoidance stunt affected disclosure obligations, they could demand a review. Halden was still holding back $22 million. Senior executives were suddenly asking why the woman tied to the largest revenue package in company history had been removed 19 hours before payout. Grant did what desperate leaders do when facts become inconvenient. He scheduled an all-hands meeting. According to 3 different people who sent me notes, he appeared on camera with his polished smile and emergency confidence. "Mira Dalton is part of our past," he said. "We are moving toward the future." Then the internal Q&A board lit up. Anonymous question: does that future include reading contracts before firing people? The meeting ended early. Tragic. I was told the mute button got more action than the CEO. I stayed silent. That bothered Grant more than any public statement could have. He wanted outrage. He wanted a dramatic post, a furious email, something he could label unprofessional. I gave him documents instead. Documents do not yell. They simply wait until the right person reads them. The board demanded Grant submit his complete decision record. He produced 14 pages of heroic nonsense, casting himself as a guardian of fiscal discipline. Unfortunately, every paragraph collided with an email, a meeting minute, an HR log, or his own timestamp. Paula went on medical leave. The CFO formally separated himself from the termination decision. Elena recommended full payment before the matter became industry gossip with legal footnotes. By late afternoon, the board voted to open an independent investigation into Grant. That was when pressure became gravity. Then Halden sent its official letter. Sterling Ridge had 10 days to either restore my advisory role or prove my replacement could meet the contractual standard. Otherwise, the entire $180 million agreement would be terminated. Grant had finally become the liability. The board finally called me. Not Grant, not Paula, not some trembling HR coordinator reading from a script. Marianne Voss, chair of the board, called directly, which told me Sterling Ridge had reached the stage where pride becomes too expensive. "Mira," she said, "we'd like to resolve this cleanly." Cleanly. Such a graceful word for sweeping broken glass under a rug. She offered full payment of $11.8 million if I signed an NDA waived claims, and agreed not to pursue litigation. I let the silence sit for a moment. "Marianne," I said, "I don't need to stay silent so they can look innocent." Her breathing changed. Not anger. Calculation. I gave her my terms. Full payment within 48 hours. Written confirmation that my termination had no connection to performance. Sterling Ridge would cover Nathan's legal fees. Grant would be removed from every Halden-related decision immediately. And no language suggesting I had resigned, transitioned, separated, or any other corporate verb used to make a firing sound like yoga. Marianne asked, "Do you want to come back?" I almost laughed. "No. I want you to learn how to run the company without me fixing the parts you break." That same afternoon, Halden sent me an independent consulting offer, 12 months, $3.2 million. Strictly advisory, reviewed by counsel, no use of Sterling Ridge confidential information. I was not stealing a client. The client was walking toward competence. Grant would probably need a consultant to explain the difference when he found out. He called it betrayal. Marianne's reply reached me through Elena. "No. Grant. Betrayal is firing the person holding the company upright and acting surprised when it falls." By 5 p.m., the board suspended Grant pending the investigation. At 5:37, Nathan forwarded the payment confirmation. $11,842,000. Successfully transferred. Grant had wanted leverage instead. He had handed me the steering wheel himself, for the first time all week. I smiled without restraint. Grant resigned 3 days later. The company announcement said he was leaving to pursue new leadership opportunities. In plain English, that meant nobody wanted him near a contract, a payroll decision, or a pen with ink in it. Paula disappeared next. The investigation found she helped create performance notes after my termination. Apparently, post-firing creativity is not a recognized HR competency. The CFO kept his job because he cooperated early. Elna was promoted to general counsel for stopping the fire before it reached the newspapers. Sterling Ridge paid me more than $11.8 million, lost control of the Halden transition, and then had to hire me back as an outside consultant at several times my old rate. Beautiful. Sometimes the cheapest way to keep valuable people is not treating them like a line item to cut. A month later, I sat in my new office at Dalton Strategic Advisory. No Sterling Ridge logo, no Grant Whitmore photo in a corporate newsletter, pretending confidence was strategy. Just one framed scan on my desk, Clause 14B. Beneath it, a small brass plate read before signing. Marianne emailed that morning, thanking me for keeping Halden on schedule. I replied, "I always finish the work. I just charge correctly now." Later, someone sent me a screenshot. Grant had seen the announcement that 3 investment funds had invited me to serve as strategic advisor. He had fired me to save $4 million. In return, he lost his title, cost Sterling Ridge tens of millions, and handed me a reputation money could not buy. I did not destroy the company with anger. I simply let Grant's arrogance do the labor. That afternoon, another firm sent over an executive agreement. I opened it and smiled. First clause, Clause 14B, requested by the board. That's my story. What about yours? Have you ever been pushed out, overlooked, or treated like you were disposable right before you were supposed to receive something you had truly earned? Maybe it was a bonus, a promotion, credit for your work, or simply basic respect. Share your story in the comments. I really want to hear it, and I'll read every single one. This story reminds me that sometimes the strongest revenge is not anger, shouting, or chaos. It is preparation. It is knowing your worth, protecting your work, and staying calm when others expect you to break. After everything that happened, I walked away with 3 lessons I will never forget. First, never let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting what you have earned. Fair treatment is not a favor. Second, always read, save, and understand the documents that affect your career. A single clause can protect years of sacrifice. Third, silence can be powerful when it is backed by truth, evidence, and patience. Which lesson left the deepest impression on you? If this story meant something to you, please subscribe, leave a comment, like the video, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your voice may help someone in this community feel less alone.
Welcome to Boardroom Revenge Stories, a channel focused on workplace conflict, corporate betrayal, power struggles, and quiet justice. Our stories follow a structured workflow to deliver a consistent, immersive experience. We start by analyzing real discussions on Reddit, Facebook, Quora, and blogs. Next, we craft original scripts using AI tools like ChatGPT. We then use 11 Labs to transform text into high-quality voice and edit everything in CapCut for a smooth, cinematic finish. Thumbnails are designed with Canva, and every video is carefully reviewed before release. These stories go beyond entertainment, revealing how power truly works and how justice quietly unfolds.